This is the 46 of 46 podcast summit session, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps to bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 summit sessions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast. Summer is in full swing here in the ADK. We've had sunshine, we've had rain, and the black flies are out in full swarm. So bring those bug nets if you're heading into the woods. But the summertime in the Adirondacks is a great time of year. Everyone's having a good time. You're never going to drive down the road and not see somebody out running or out on their bike. And you're definitely not going to see a car without a canoe or a kayak on the top anywhere you go. And that is what I like about the Adirondacks. That is what this place represents. You know, I say all the time that outdoors areas and mountain towns, they always have different vibes. Sometimes they have very kind of artsy vibes. Sometimes they have very sporty vibes. And around here, it is the sporty vibe. And that is what I like so much. And the summertime really reflects and showcases that very much. Speaking of the summer and things to do during the summer here in the Adirondacks, this week I have a summit session episode all about the Adirondack Experience Museum out in Blue Mountain Lake. And I have two different people from the museum on here to talk about what they do, what they have that's new at the museum this year, and just to give you a little rundown of what they offer out there, because it is an absolutely magnificent museum. It's the type of place where when you enter the parking lot and then you enter the front door, you're just wowed right from the start. And you think, wow, I can't believe this exists here in the Adirondacks. It is the real deal. Anyways, from the Adirondack Experience Museum in Blue Mountain Lake, I have Doreen and Cheryl here to talk all about what they got going on this summer. And it is a place that you have to visit. So Doreen and Cheryl, welcome to the 4646 podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
This is Cheryl, and we're really excited.
Your museum, and I've talked about this on the podcast a few times, is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And it's not even just because I just love the Adirondacks and I love Adirondack history. The actual museum itself, regardless of what the subject matter is of the museum, it's impressive. Just, you know, it could be about sharks and it would be like, holy cow, this is massive. This building, all the buildings, all the exhibits, all the property, like it is huge. And it's just something that, having grown up in the Adirondacks, and actually apparently we went there in fourth grade for a field trip, but I have no recollection of it. But when I went there a few summers ago with my family, I was absolutely blown away at the professionalism of that museum. And I just want to commend all of you. And I have talked about it a lot on this podcast over the last couple of years. So I applaud all of you for your hard work, for making it an absolutely amazing museum that, again, you would not expect it to be here in the Adirondacks, but it's the type of place you could put up against any museum anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, because it is an awesome spot. And you guys have done a great job.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is Doreen. We're really proud of what we do. You'll have to get back soon because we opened an exhibit last year all about art and objects called Artisan Inspiration in the Adirondacks. And it is 5 rooms filled of 250 of our works of art and artifacts in anything from paintings from the 1800s to indigenous works of art that are modern and just gorgeous artifacts as well, and beautiful spaces to be in. And that's our sort of new central exhibit. You've got to come out to see it.
Actually, I did. We came out last summer, and because when we came 2 years ago, I think the building was closed, and then we came out again last summer, and we will definitely be out this summer to see this NPT exhibit you have going on. But we'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, it was awesome. I mean, again, it's you guys have gone to another level, because here in the Adirondacks, right? Like, you know, we know what this park is. We're usually kind of behind the times in most things. You know, you kind of step back in time when you come in, when you enter the blue line. But your museum is the polar opposite of that. I mean, even from the things that you can do with your kids, like there's the log jam, there's the mining exhibit where, you actually are like blowing up rocks, all that cool stuff. You guys really go above and beyond. And again, every building you walk into, it's massive and there's so much stuff. And it's so well put together. So I'm always blown away. So I will definitely be out there again this summer. Real quick question. How do you guys determine, what the new things you're going to do are? I'd love to know how you even determine what should we add to the museum next.
Cheryl, why don't you take that?
Sure, this is Cheryl. So I would say that each exhibit has a little bit of a different backstory behind it. The museum did do a master plan with several consultants from within the area, outside of the area, who were brought in to kind of look at what's needed, what have we got that is dated, and where are some areas that we really have potential. And actually, Doreen mentioned artist and inspiration in the wild. That actually came out of that exhibit master plan, where we had this phenomenal collection of objects that did not have a permanent home. And one reason it didn't have a permanent home is we've been around for a long time. A lot of our buildings predate what's existing best practices for collection and collection care. And so we couldn't put a lot of that art out into some of our buildings just because the climate conditions weren't correct. So now we have an opportunity. We put a lot of money into the building to make it state of the art, as everything else has been over the 60 years that we've been here. Talking about the Northville-Placid, we have this phenomenal person in Dory who brought an idea for a temporary exhibit to the senior staff. We've got this great collection. It's a significant milestone with the centennial. So here's an opportunity. So we look at things like that in any of the decision making. In any one day, we're probably exploring about 10 different future exhibit ideas based upon, again, collection needs, based upon something significant happening in the area. Right now, we're thinking about what we might do with our log hotel, because we just got a major grant to conserve the building itself. But some of that building is actually not open to the public. So is this an opportunity for us to look at what we're doing for visitors in that building? We're building a new temporary exhibit gallery that will be a new temporary exhibit gallery now that the art exhibit is in what was our temporary exhibit spaces. So we've got a exhibit that's in the planning stages for that for next year, and then thinking about what we might do in 2027 with that building and onward. So we've always got a lot of ideas dancing around our head.
Awesome. Always growing. It's good to see. And while you're listening to the episode, if you want to check out the website, it's theadkx.org, the Adirondack Experience Museum on Blue Mountain Lake. Before we move further, Doreen, why don't you tell us what you do at the museum, and then Cheryl we'll hear what you do at the museum, so we have some context out of what your roles are out there.
Yeah, sure. So this is Doreen. I'm the conservator and the collections manager at the museum. So conservator is the person who preserves and takes care of the artifacts. I have a master's of science, and I'm here to preserve everything that we have. And I'm also the collections manager, so I oversee the data in our collection database. We have an in-house database that we catalog things in, but we also have this massive online database, which is, you could probably Google Adirondack Experience Collection Database, and you'll find our online database, which has more than 80,000 items in it. But since I've been here for 27 years, I also do a lot of other things. I've led some tours on I'm a paddler, so I've helped to lead some of the paddling tours. And I'm currently doing a photogrammetry 3D modeling of our amazing guideboat collection. So there's a lot going, I do a lot of things. I have my fingers in a lot of pies here, but we are a small staff and we all do many things. But the big thing is that I just love the collection. There's so many amazing artifacts in our collection.
Oh, there's, I mean, you said 80,000, but it is, like I said, it's mind blowing when you go out there and then you get, you read the story about each piece, like in any museum. And, it's, yeah, again, massive. There's so much stuff in that museum. I could spend a week there and just exist reading every single thing. And I feel like I'll come out knowing so much more about the ADK than I feel like I know right now, because I always go out there too. Every time I go out there, I snap a lot of photos of different things. I was like, oh, I could make a little piece of content about this, or, oh, this would be a good podcast episode. Let me research this more. And I get a lot of inspiration for my own stuff from out there. But awesome, very cool. I'm going to have some questions for you shortly. But Cheryl, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I am the director of interpretation at the Adirondack Experience. And most of my job revolves connecting the museum with all of our visitors, whether they're on site or in school groups. One of my major roles with exhibitions is the project management. So fundraising, working on the contracts, working with the curatorial team on developing that content and defining what the visitor experience will be. And I remember once somebody thought that it takes about 6 weeks to put an exhibit together, when no, it can take 6 years when you're talking about, again, long grant periods and trying to fundraise, trying to identify all the objects, which, again, working with the curatorial team to do that, doing the research, working with designers, making it beautiful, making it immersive, making it experiential. Working with evaluators. So what do our visitors know about something? What do they hope to learn? And that we use all that information as we're developing the exhibits. And then also in the Department of Interpretation, we have public and school programs. So of our 50 to 60,000 individual contacts every year through school programs and public programs, that's a lot of the team that I work with. Obviously, we all know what happened in 2019, 2020. So we are now really a year-round museum, even though our front doors are only open from Memorial Day through Indigenous Peoples Day. We now are presenting programs throughout the year. We do winter hikes. We do a fabulous new library series to talk about new authors in the Adirondacks. We have a great taps and trivia program that we're doing. And so we're really actually excited to be able to continue our engagement year-round. And then our school programs team is fantastic. They will provide free programs to public schools in any county that touches the Adirondacks. And we're having an impact on about 10 to 12,000 students every year through school programs by bringing the museum to schools. So it's a lot, and it's all, again, in that Department of Interpretation.
Awesome. But you're expanding and doing more and, growing and, expanding the reach of what you guys are doing, which is very cool. So now, Doreen, so if somebody has some sort of piece of history, you're the contact that they go to, or you're the one who tracks down that artifact. Is that how am I understanding your role correctly?
That is sort of it. It's people do contact the museum through a variety of ways when they have an artifact or work of art or some piece of history that they'd like to offer to us. And I am one of those contact people. Sometimes it's just through the info email address. We also have a chief curator. So what happens is the first thing I do is I ask questions about this artifact, because the artifacts are great in and of themselves, but they have to tell the story. They have to tell a story of something in the Adirondacks. So basically, we're looking for objects that were made or used in the Adirondacks. It could be something from outside the region, but that it was used here and tells an individual and specific story. I mean, artwork that's done about the Adirondacks doesn't have to have been done by an artist in the park to be appropriate for our collection. But we do get offers of boats quite often, because people know we have this massive and wonderful boat collection. But if that boat was not used in the Adirondacks, then we wouldn't accept it into our collection, because it doesn't tell the stories of the Adirondack people But we do have another way of using that boat, and that is our amazing program out on Minnow Pond, where people can actually row or paddle historic craft after walking 3/4 of a mile out to on a very accessible trail out to Minnow Pond. Have you done that yet while you were here?
No, as you're saying, I was like, oh, I missed that. I wasn't aware of that. Tell us more.
So that's a program that's generally open in July and August, possibly late June, depending on whether we have enough staff to staff the trailhead and the boathouse for safety.
Sure.
But also it's something that gets canceled during thunderstorms. So we don't allow people to walk out to the pond or to take boats out when there's thunderstorms in the forecast. Cheryl, can you talk a little bit more about our Minnow Pond program and our Blue View Trail?
Sure. So the Minnow Pond Trail opened up in 2019, as Doreen mentioned. It's a 3/4 mile trail out to the boathouse. The boathouse, it's free, so anybody can go out there. There is a time limitation, about a half an hour. So it's really a chance for people to get their feet wet using a vintage craft of some sort. And again, as Doreen mentioned, we have a lot of water safety precautions. It's meant to be a chance for people who maybe aren't the most experienced recreational users of watercraft to just try their hands at it and get a sense of it, and in a really safe, protected area. And then we also have a second trail, Blue View Trail, which is a little bit more strenuous. That does have a bit more of a steeper grade. It doesn't, and it's got a bit more of an uneven surface, but there's some really fantastic views of Blue View, hence the name. And depending upon how the leaf situation is, you can also sometimes get a peek at some of the remains of some of the original cottages from this site from 100+ years ago.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Now, the new, the art exhibit that you have there to the building on the left, there's so much stuff in there. And I know, Cheryl, you had talked about you could get. They say an exhibit takes 6 weeks, but for you, it could also be 6 years. How long in the making was that exhibit? And then, how did you get all the stuff in there? How did you know where all these paintings are? How did all of this stuff from, there's just so much stuff in there. So how does that all come to be? I personally would like to know.
Sure. I'm just sorry, just to clarify, exhibits never take 6 weeks unless unless you've got a phenomenal team. It's surprising. People walk in and think, oh, we just hung up a bunch of pictures on the wall and that was it, and we called it a day. But that project actually started with some seed money from a very generous Adirondack donor. I will give a shout out to Annette Merle Smith, who recently did pass away. She had a huge impact on this region, and she was a wonderful friend to the museum. So she actually created the seed money. She gave the initial donation that started that project. Again, the idea for it came out of this exhibit master plan. We're looking at the fact that this was an underutilized part of our collection as far as public engagement. We did have some of these objects go out on loan. We would put them out ourselves for some temporary exhibitions, but really wanted a permanent home. So we started planning for this exhibit in all earnestness back in 2018,
Wow.
starting to figure out how we wanted to organize the exhibit. For those of you who've been to the museum before, but maybe not since last year, you used to be able to walk in, you'd see this fabulous interactive map, which we still have. It's now in Life in the Adirondacks, and you would go left or you would go right. Maybe you would switch sides and then you'd walk back out that same door. One of the concerns as we started working on this is that we didn't want people to do that anymore. We wanted to make sure that people saw everything, that there was a clear organization. So we actually changed we put in a wall when it was not a wall before, so that people really didn't have to make a choice on which way to go. We also did something that's really unusual for an art exhibit. This is not based upon chronology. It's actually more based upon how the natural features of the Adirondacks, which is what we all know and love, the mountains around us, the light, the forest, the fabulous water, how all of that has inspired artists for actually 10,000 years. Not 1,000 years. Sorry. The oldest object that we have on view is from somewhere around 1300 to 1500. It's a indigenous potsherd. Everything else is actually much more of the last 200 to 250 years. But this area is known for inspiring artists from, again, from 1,000 years ago up till this morning, where we really, it's an evolving exhibit. We are constantly going to be rotating objects in and out. We have a great new piece that you won't have seen yet that just came out this year called Cosmic Portal, which was done by Tyler Schrader, who is, I wouldn't even call him emerging. He is a young Adirondack maker. He's doing incredible work with wood and light, again, really informed by the natural features of the Adirondacks. But it did take about 2 to 3 years to just hone in on what the 250 objects out of, again, the thousands that Doreen mentioned could be in this exhibit. And then really wanting this exhibit to be for everybody. So there's objects in there that we really hope our younger visitors will find, or these little kind of peekaboo moments. We have indigenous makers. We really wanted to be inclusive. So a lot of the works are utilitarian and really showing that craft and design is as much of a form of art as fine art and painting and more traditional, the masters with the Tates and the Stoddards. We've got Harold Weston in there, but we've got incredible baskets. We've got some ceramics from some contemporary Akwesasne makers. So really, the biggest challenge is almost trying to figure out, you've only got so much space. How can we go ahead and make those choices? But again, every year it will be a very different experience. One other thing that's really special about it is that we have our ADKX Art Lab, which is a maker space, and we were really fortunate to work with Adirondack maker Barney Bellinger, who not only inspired it, but actually came and helped us put together a maker space that defies description. It's a snapshot into Barney's incredible studio. So you'll see this mishmash of like frames and the forms that were used to create leather gloves, in decades ago, and just some of the most bizarre industrial things that have created a space that's just really inspiring. And we love having, especially like our young visitors, will just sit there for an hour. It's an area that's fully staffed, and our fabulous interpretation assistants will help young artists and those who are really curious just try their hands at making something themselves.
No, it's great. It's fantastic stuff. I'm a huge fan myself of the fact that there are so many things that are hands-on there, like the boat, or not the boating, the canoe kind of area there where you can actually like paddle, quote unquote. That's cool. I believe that's in the
Life in the
Adirondacks building. Then, I mean, obviously there's a whole train. There's a train car in there. You have boats, you have trains outside, trains inside. Like, again, if you've never been to the museum, it is massive. And there are so many different exhibits, and you could spend a week going there every day and just focusing on one building and learning so much more about everything that you guys have to offer. Now, this year is the 100th year of the Northville-Placid Trail. And I know that you have a new exhibit there. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about that and tell us what we can expect? Because here on this podcast, the NPT is talked about often. I did a whole season of my podcast retelling my story, hiking the Northville-Placid Trail, section by section and, trail top to bottom. And I do probably an episode or two every year on that trail. So very popular trail. So tell us a little bit about what we can expect in that exhibit.
Yeah, sure. This is Doreen. And I wanted to tell you sort of how I had even come across this as an idea. 15 years ago, I happened to be cataloging some items that had been in the collection since the 1960s. They had previously, they had a catalog card that just like, there was a candle lantern. And I'm like, what's a candle lantern? And it turned out that this one little lantern that would hold a candle that you would use, that you could carry with you when you're backpacking, it's 120 years old. And it was owned by this man named Edwin Noyce. And as I dug into this object and the accession in which it had come to the museum, it came with a whole bunch of other items that were backpacking related or camping related. And I started to do some research on this man. And this was really before Google was a really big thing, but I came across a reference that this was the man who was the main force behind surveying and cutting the Northville-Placid Trail. And that had opened in 1924. And so this is 15 years ago. And I happened to think to myself, well, gee, wouldn't it be pretty awesome if we could talk about this guy in 2024, never expecting that I would still be at the same institution, let alone doing the exhibit. So over the decade, I had been sort of compiling a list of things that were related to the Northville-Placid Trail and Edwin Noyce that are in our collection. And, I just want to take a quick side trip and say, you asked a question about where did we get all of this stuff that went into the new art exhibit. So what you see on exhibit at the museum is only one small fraction of everything that we have. So we have high security storage facilities, storage areas that are just chock full of artifacts and artwork that tell stories and illustrate things. So it was just one of those little side projects that I had going on over the last decade. And I've been wanting to talk about or tell the story of this guy, Edwin Noyce, who was a World War I veteran. And he was from Massachusetts, but he was living in Troy. He had tuberculosis, which he probably had contracted while he was overseas. And he visited a doctor who told them that he had less than a year to live if he didn't get out of the city. Now, 100 years ago, there was quite a bit of air pollution in our cities. And so he was instructed to go to the Adirondacks. And this was a well-educated man, somehow got involved with doing land surveys with the state land superintendent, Arthur Hopkins. And so he, in 1920 and 21, was on a survey of the Adirondack region on the Hopkins survey. And during that time, he met a young man named Howard Rowe, who was living in Long Lake with his family, who had come down from Canada. He was French Canadian, now living in the village of Long Lake, which was a very tiny village. And when the state proposed that a long trail be developed in the Adirondacks in an effort to encourage people to go hiking in this area that was being preserved, this large preserve, the state suggested that someone build a trail, and this is actually how the Adirondack Mountain Club was formed. The state requested and paid for Howard Rowe and Edwin Noyce to build this trail, but then also instructed that a group be formed to maintain this trail. And of course, the Adirondack Mountain Club does much, much more than that as well now. But that was the early days of the Adirondack Mountain Club, which I think their centennial was in 22. So anyway, all things sort of came together last August, when a number of the various constituents around the park came to the museum or contacted our director and said, the centennial is 24. Can you do anything? Is the museum able to do anything to celebrate this centennial? And our director didn't know that I had this side project going on all this time. So when he asked the question at a meeting, can we do something to help the Adirondack Park celebrate the centennial? I sort of dropped this huge folder of things on the desk in front of me and said, we can tell a lot of stories. So and then Cheryl, as the director of interpretation, is essential in helping me to tell the stories. I can enthuse about the objects ad nauseum, but she is the one who helps to tease out the stories that tell a cohesive narrative and tie some themes together. I was just excited because we have artwork from 100 years ago depicting the Wanaka Falls lean-to, which was dismantled in the 1980s, I think. And so there are many people living today who would never have even seen what this lean-to looks like, just 7 miles south of Lake Placid. And we have modern artworks, people that have drawn or painted while they were actually on the trail somewhere. And then there's the objects belonging to Anne LaBastille, who many people know as the author of Woodswoman. She was a real advocate for exploring the wilderness and for conservation. And in the 1970s, she hiked the trail, thru-hiked a couple of times, took extensive notes, wrote an article that was the cover of the Backpacker magazine in one month in 1977. Now, one day during the early winter, as we were planning this exhibit, our museum librarian showed me the cover of this 1977 Backpacker magazine. Anne LaBastille was the cover story, and there she is, a photograph that she took of herself using her single lens reflex camera. You know, this is before the era of digital selfies. She would have been carrying a heavy camera and heavy lens with her on this through trip, setting it up and self-timing it to take photographs of herself and her dog in certain places along the trail. But as I look at this photograph on the cover of Backpacker, I said, oh my God, we have that backpack in our collection. We have that dog's backpack in our collection. Can we put all of this together? So there is now a case talking about Anne LaBastille and her experience on the trail. It's got her notebook and her backpack and her sleeping bag and an amazingly archaic headlamp that's connected to a battery pack that by a wire that she would have worn the battery pack on her hip. And I just can't even imagine what that would be like, how much weight that would add, because modern day headlamps are just so lightweight. So right here is an example of how I can enthuse about this stuff forever. Cheryl helped to keep me, rein me in, and help me to tell those stories.
I think one of the things, this is Cheryl, I think one of the things that also has been really exciting about this project is the deep personal connections that people have with it. Doreen mentioned Anne LaBastille. We also have a young person who just completed it a couple of years ago with her father. We have her boots on exhibit. And I love this wonderful story that she told where she was a Paul Smith student and she and her father hiked to NPT. And she says her father walked her to school, which is just lovely. We have an opportunity for people to submit their own stories. So there's a QR code in the exhibit where people can upload their own photos, upload some text, their own reminiscences about this NPT and whether or not you've ever set foot on it or not. So many people have a story. As we were actually collecting things for this exhibit, just within the museum's own files, we found things about Clarence Petty. We have a lot of Noah John Wando, our famous hermit, who, Cold River was just off of it. There's fabulous people stories, historical, up until, again, this morning, somebody will send something in. So we really love the fact that this is another opportunity for people, people today to make a connection to the past and to a place that's very special, which I think is one of the best things about this museum. We are a place-based museum. Doreen mentioned everything in our collection has to have some kind of a relationship to the Adirondack. And it's really phenomenal, like indescribable how much the museum means to this place and this place means to people.
Oh, absolutely. I I grew up in the Adirondacks. I grew up here, but like any kid who grows up in somewhere, a small town, it's like, can't wait to get out. Right. That's all we say. And then you get out and then the mountains draw you back. And it wasn't even until I was in my, I'd say late 20s where I realized, what do you mean this Adirondack Park is like a thing for people? It's not a thing for people. It's the small, crappy little towns everywhere. Like we don't even have a mall anywhere. You got to drive to Plattsburgh, right? So it's like by starting to see that it is a thing, which everyone listening to this podcast is like, oh, James, it's definitely a thing. I didn't even realize that until, later into life here. But man, once you realize it really is. And then you start to appreciate things more. Like this park is a different place for me now than it was growing up in terms of how I view it, what I see it as, the opportunity, the adventure that just is everywhere. It means so much to people. And I'd say that's like the biggest understatement that we could ever possibly say. Like, people are just completely transformed top to bottom when they enter, they pass that now entering Adirondack Park sign, and it's a beautiful thing. And the fact that people have that to experience and they have a place that brings that out of them is a beautiful thing. And you guys have really captured that in a fantastic way at the museum. I always tell people that these mountains have a mysterious quality to them. It's like they hold secrets and you just don't know what it is, but you know that there's something beneath the surface here. You just can't figure out what it is, but it keeps you coming back for more and more. And you need to know more. You've learned this, you learn that. And I feel that exact kind of essence is captured at the Adirondack Experience Museum. And not just because you have, just the general history of it all, but when you start to see just how vast the history is from the mining, from the logging, from the Native Americans, from the art, the great camps, like all the stuff, it really does paint a cohesive picture. And, Cheryl, you are a storyteller. And as a storyteller myself, I gravitate towards, and I always appreciate when you see the bigger picture, which is, everything pieced together to create what the story is, little, episodes that create the season of the television show. Same thing. It's like every little piece tells a story for the bigger picture. And it's clear that that's, yours and Doreen's, kind of a partnership in building these things and working it together at the museum. You've done a fantastic job because you both have different roles, but those roles come together for the greater good of what you're trying to do. And you guys have done a great job with that.
Thanks. That's nice to hear.
Now with the Northville-Placid Trail, let me ask you this, Doreen. So obviously this exhibit, I mean, what your ears must have perked up like crazy during that meeting when it was like, well, actually, let me show you what I've been accumulating in the foresight I've had over the last, decade or whatever it was. Throughout that time, what was your favorite, or even now, what is your favorite artifact that you collected during that time of pre-planning for this exhibit? I'd like to know.
Oh, gee, that's a really, really tough question.
We do tough questions here on the 4646 podcast.
So, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. One of the things that I hadn't even looked at previous to this was a map by Verplanck Colvin of the Northville area before the Conklin Dam was built, and so there was no Great Sacandaga Lake. Northville was a little tiny community. The train station at Sacandaga Park, which was the train station for Northville, is like, there's just this little reference to, here's the train station, and that was the very end of the line, of that particular rail line. And I wanted that in the exhibit because that is why the trail is the Northville-Placid Trail. Why did the state choose those two towns as the termini of this trail, because that's where the rail service ended, in both cases. The line from the south coming up to Sacandaga Park, and the line from the north ending in Lake Placid. So back in the 1920s, when most people didn't own their own automobiles, they would have taken a train up to one of those stations, could have hiked the trail from end to end, and taken a train from the other train station back to their home. So being able to just look at this old map from it's 1897, Verplanck Colvin, the surveyor of the Adirondacks, one of my favorite people.
Same.
To have that in the exhibit. But then Edwin Noyce, his little mess kit was in World War I surplus. That was one of the reasons that there was more hiking happening in the 1920s. Is there was this plethora, there was just an abundance of World War I surplus, relatively lightweight hiking, backpacking, camping materials that the general public could now get their hands on. And so that fueled a greater interest in going out and exploring. And the state was really just trying to get people interested in the Adirondacks.
Sure.
But what other things? So I think my other favorite thing is not an artifact, but it is a photo op. So down in Northville, at the very beginning of the trail, is this gigantic rustic arch that was made by artist Bill Coffey. And there are photographs all over the internet of people beginning or ending their NPT hike at this arch.
I have one myself. It's awesome.
Well, awesome. I thought, what a great photo opportunity. I approached Bill Coffey, asked if we could make a scale model of that. It is built on the wall in the exhibit. It's, instead of being 13 feet high, it's 8 feet high. So people can stand at our scale model of the arch and get the photo op.
And that's what I say. You guys go above and beyond at the Adirondack Experience Museum. Like, that is a prime example of what I've been saying. You guys go above and beyond what anyone would expect. So again, pat on the back for you guys. And as just a fan of what you do, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I will definitely be getting a picture there.
And I have to shout out to our amazing carpenters in our shop, because when I approached them last September to say, hey, I've got this idea, but do you have time to build this over the winter? They're like, oh, yeah, this is amazing. So they threw themselves into that and built that.
Now, when can we get another version? We'll take the 8-footer. When can we get that put in Lake Placid? So when you get to Lake Placid, it's not the most underwhelming finish of all time compared to that Northville, arch at the beginning. We need another one made to plop over in Lake Placid, because it is too underwhelming for my opinion.
Well, Bill Coffey might you could probably convince him to help with something like that. Mm-hmm. He loves to build.
And I think right now ADK is actively trying to address the Lake Placid terminus and put some thought into a happier ending moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs it. It's, because it is unfortunately underwhelming from every stretch of the imagination. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it is ultimately. So I always, my buddy Josh and I, who people on this podcast hear his name all the time, we always talk about how one day we're just going to make it ourselves and just put it up there. And who's going to say no? What's the DEC going to come take it down? Just kidding. We're not actually going to do that. Just kidding, everyone. But we do joke about that all the time because it needs it. And it's just, it would be a much more triumphant moment. But then it's like, do you put it at the trail or do you put it down at the museum? Maybe both, because technically the museum is the end of the trail, the train station.
Right.
One thing that we're really excited about, this is Cheryl again, with this project, is it also opened up an opportunity for us to do some different programs. And I do want to give a shout out to some of what we've got coming up. We are doing a monthly talk. Actually, Julia Gorin with the with ADK is actually our first speaker on July 9th. We've got a Halfway in Hamilton celebration here. We actually are hoping to get 138 people to come, one for every current mile of the trail, to do a photo op. We'll have a drone, so come to the museum on July 9th at noon. We're going to do a photo op with as many people who've hiked the trail. Doesn't have to be a through hiker, doesn't have to be a finisher, just somebody who's touched it in some way. We'll have Julia here doing a program. We're going to have campfire stories, s'mores for people to just talk about the NPT and what it means to them. And then there'll be a short tour with Dory of the exhibit itself. And we're going to do 2 more of those Tuesday trail talks with Matt Burnett, who's a Saranac Lake-based artist and guide. And then the DEC is going to wrap up those Tuesday trail talks in September. We've also got Ed Cans, who is a pretty well-known naturalist guide in the region. He does regular hikes with us throughout our open season, but once a month, he's going to also be doing a short section hike of the NPT for our visitors. And all those programs are on the museum's calendar of events. James, just to echo what you said earlier, the adkx.org. We really hope that people can not just see the exhibit, but also take part in some of these special programs that we've got in honor of the exhibit and the centennial.
Very cool. Now, tell me a little bit more about the trail talks. Did you say what will they be speaking about in particular? Or what is that going to look like?
So each of the 3 talks are very different. Julia and the team from DEC, obviously there'll probably be some similarities. So talking a lot about what it takes to maintain trails, the volunteers that are needed, the resources that are needed. Any of you who've been on the trail know there's blowdowns, there's beaver dams, there's frequently this natural forces that have an impact. So even, Dory mentioned the work of Noyes and Rowe 100 years ago, but that work did not stop with them. It continues on a regular basis. And certainly DEC and ADK, who both are sharing responsibility for the NPT and its preservation, are going to be talking about some of the needs for maintaining and preserving the trails that 100 years from now, people can talk about it as an experience as well. And then Matt will talk about his own efforts. He did it as a through hike. He created some incredible art that we have in the exhibit while he was doing his through hike. And so just as a seasoned hiker of it, talking about his experience. And then each of those will be accompanied by a short tour, either led by Dory or myself, of the exhibit, just to call out some of the highlights.
Sounds like a great time. Sounds like a fantastic time. Trail Tuesdays at the Adirondack Experience. Very cool. So we'll start to wrap up this episode here. I could probably ask you guys questions for many hours, but especially about, we didn't even get into Verplank Colvin talks. And anyone that knows me personally knows I'm pretty obsessed with him. Anytime somebody brings up Teddy Roosevelt, I go, ooh, I am Team Colvin, not Team Teddy Roosevelt. And they're like, but Teddy did such good things. I said, yeah, but he fired Verplank Colvin and ultimately, started the unfortunate cascade of his later years. But anyways, big Verplank Colvin guy. Might have to have you come back on the show to talk solely some more history, because most of the podcast listeners really enjoy the history lesson episodes that I do throughout the course of this podcast. And I personally am huge into it. But I always like to ask people on these summit sessions a few different questions towards the end of the podcast. But for you, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I'd like you both to answer this. So one of the questions I ask is, what, in your opinion, makes the Adirondacks a unique place? What do you feel makes it the type of place, like we talked about before, where this is people's happy place? Like the Adirondacks is a thing for people. Why do you guys feel that it is? We'll start with you, Doreen.
Well, I came here 27 years ago to work on a 9-month grant here at the museum, and I started in January. and I'm still here. Because I fell in love with the region, in addition to falling in love with the museum's collection. And over the years, I have completed just about every challenge that has been out there. I'm a 46er. I'm number 52 finisher of your Lake Placid Niner.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
So for me, what makes this area so unique is the combinations of lake, of water and mountains and forest, and the fact that between these communities, these little communities, you can step into wilderness and take a breath, not hear too much noise from mankind, and really feel the earth beneath your feet. And really, for some people, that's a very profound thing. They can feel part of something larger. For some people, they can feel very insignificant, but it is not an experience that you can feel in very many other places in the world. There's something about our forests that feels so much more primeval than standing out in the middle of a field in, say, the Midwest. And I think that really connects with people. But I'm very much in love with the ruggedness of this terrain. And I also love flying over it in one of the airplanes, say from Long Lake, the village of Long Lake, to fly with a friend in their little biplane and to see these just gemstones of lakes and ponds and rivers reflecting the sunlight off at you, and celebrating achievements by going to climb a mountain. Just so I could go on. It's
endless adventure here in the Adirondack Park. All right, Cheryl, what do you feel makes the Adirondacks a unique place from your perspective?
Sure. Well, unlike Dory, I'm actually a fairly recent transplant. I've only been up here not in 6 years yet, which it still makes me very much an infant in the woods. But I feel like I can't describe how many times I've been carpooling with people, and especially you come over the crest right into Blue Mountain Lake, and you're coming down the hill, and the way the mist and the mountains, just the light, all of it, it's stunning. And you can see these views again and again and again, but every time the way it all plays out differently from season to season. There's so many times where I feel like I just have to stop. I was driving to work 2 weeks ago, and there was a sandhill crane just off the road, which I haven't seen a sandhill crane in 20 years, and it was just there. And I remember, being out with my dog in Saranac Lake, and the moon looked beautiful, and having to go take a picture. And a half hour later, the moon had shifted in the sky, and the way, the light and the reflection was completely different. And I had to go and take another picture. And I feel like that just never gets old. It never feels tired. It's fresh every time. So there's so much here to see and experience and be awed by and connect on a really just profound human level with how beautiful this place is and how beautiful it's always been. And it's just, I've been to the Rockies, I've been all over the Sierras, and there's something about these mountains and this place that just, you feel it in your gut, you feel it in your heart, and just, it's incredible.
I love it. And I can really relate to your about taking the pictures. I feel like every time I go do a sunset hike or a sunrise hike, I need to force myself, like, put your phone down and just enjoy it, because it's like every 30 seconds, it looks different now. Oh, I got to take a picture of that. Oh, it looks different now. Let me take another picture. And it's like, dude, put your phone down and actually enjoy it. But because it just keeps changing and keeps looking better and keeps looking, I can't tell you how many times too. So in Lake Placid, if you're up at the grocery store price chopper and then you drive like back into town, which is what I would do to go back home. And if you're ever there during sunset, like that magic hour, twilight, the way the light hits Whiteface Mountain from that perspective, I mean, I must have 100 pictures, because I just end up going to the grocery store, around the same time all the time. And every time I have to take a picture because it's like, oh my God, look at what it looks like on whiteface right now. It's the most like majestic thing you've ever seen. I just always got to take a picture. So I can relate strongly to that urge of yours. But I love your answers. And I love that this at some point in your life was a new place that has captured your heart and soul. And it's exciting for me, who grew up here and moved back here and, is raising his family here. I love seeing that. And it also kind of validates what you thought is correct. This place does have a quality that just kind of captures people's heart. And I think that's awesome. So as we wrap it up, give us a quick, some more information on what people can do, how they can find you, what stuff you have to offer, and let us know how we can get to the ADKX.
Sure. So again, we have things happening all season long. We just hosted our first event of the season with a garage sale, which was kind of a fun thing for us to do. But we have workshops. People can make a pack basket this year. They can make a paddle. We've got our famous rustic fair happening in September. We have the Artisan Festival coming up in a few weeks. We've got a new event that we're excited about called Night at the ADKX Museum. It will be a 21 and over event, so you can take a sneak peek inside some of these exhibits that we've been talking about while you're sipping a beer or some hard spirits on our campus with live music. We have Artists in Residence, which is a program that we began with Life in the Adirondacks, having Indigenous artists on campus almost every week, beginning in July. And then starting last year, we also added Artist in Inspiration, Artist in Residence program, and that will also be starting in July every week. We've got Monday evening live speakers, we've got concerts. There's, I think, almost every other day we'll be having some type of an event or program. We've got our Hikes with Ed. Again, theadkx.org. One thing I actually forgot to shout out about with Dory, one of my favorite stories, Dory took me snowshoeing probably about 2 weeks after I got here. I'd never been on snowshoes before. This is a great region. We've got fabulous trails right off of our campus, right across up the road at Blue Mountain. So come see us.
Awesome. It's going to be a good summer, and it is just the beginning. So awesome stuff. Thank you both for coming on the 46 of 46 podcast. Once again, theadkx.org. Check it out. Plan a trip to Blue Mountain Lake this summer and go spend a full day at the museum. There's so much to look at. There's so much to learn and so much to experience at the museum. Thank you both for coming on the podcast, and that will do it for another episode of the 46 of 46 podcast. Head over to 46outdoors.com to check out everything I have to offer. My new book, Adirondack Campfire Stories, is available wherever you purchase books. Check that out. It is based off the Campfire Stories episodes right here on this podcast, plus many more stories. So check that out wherever you buy your books. Sign up for some guided group hikes this summer I'm doing, all available at 46outdoors.com. That'll do it. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, everybody.